again, gang. So this is an interesting question that was brought up by Melody Writes Songs. She was responding to something I posted the other day about taking away from stuff that you pile on to recordings rather than adding stuff. And I'm paraphrasing, but she was saying, well, hey, you need more candy, add more candy. And yes, candy is great, but candy can be distracting to the message, the vocal, the feel, the whole point of the song, the vibe, the groove. Sometimes it's too much. So when is something too much? Well, let's use Papa Was a Rolling Stone as an example. Now, I have worked with Bob Olson from Motown, who was there back at that time and worked on many, many of these recordings. And if you'll notice, there's not a lot of stuff going on in Motown songs. I mean, there is, but they're very carefully and meticulously arranged. So what I mean by not a lot of stuff, there's not a lot of wheedly-wee, there's not wankery going on. Everything that's there is there for a specific purpose, to lift the song and keep it growing and the dynamic really great and push it forward all the time. That's what Motown was the best at. We all know that. But Papa Was a Rolling Stone. Motown was fortunate and they had two of the greatest arrangers, well, two of many arrangers that were just the best of all time. I mean, you had Paul Reiser and you had David Van Pitt and quite a few others. But those are the first two that come to mind because their arrangements blow my mind. Papa Was a Rolling Stone. What's going on? Boom, 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 right? Okay, that's how it starts. But then you get the waka, 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 waka. Now, all of this is the band. All of this is the Funk Brothers in the pit at Motown doing this part of the arrangement because it is all a piece. However, the musicians in the room at Motown came up with all this because that's what felt best for the song. Working with the producers, how do we make this feel the way they want and bring it up a few notches, a few levels? They didn't even have the Temptations yet. They weren't even sure probably the Temptations were going to sing this one. Working with the musicians in the pit, the Funk Brothers and the producers came up with, the ba-bump, ba-dum, bump, ba-bump, Bob Babbitt, my man who I worked with for a long time. And then the drums, the waka, 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 and then you have where Paul Reiser, and I can't remember if it was Paul Reiser or David Van Pitt on this one. Maybe it was David Van Pitt, but anyway. The strings come in, and all these little parts. But here's the trick. That track was done before David Van Pitt or Paul Reiser got to it. That whole bit, all the all of it built without having that in mind. Those guys were brought in later. The arrangers were brought in later, and that was the candy. Just like you would do if you go into the studio and you start building a track, you'll cut it with the band or do the basics and then start building it. But when is enough? Well, here's another trick about the Motown gang. Bob Olson told this to Jameson when we were here recording last week. He was like, okay, well, if you mix this, how would you do it? And Bob would be like, well, I'm going to start pulling pieces out. So candy is good, but only if it serves a purpose. It's meant to be there. It keeps the song pushing forward. It elevates it. And you should take out anything else that messes with the groove, the message, the vocal, all the things I talked about in my video about no wankery. I get it. I know a lot of modern recordings like to pile stuff on, but sometimes you're losing the message and you're losing the whole feel of what the artist is trying to say. Yes, if you want to get on the radio and have a lot of blah, blah, blah going on, cool, go for it. I'm in the other camp with Motown.